Coming up next on Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable, the legislature adjourns early this morning after nearly 6 months of often combative debate, including a controversial special session on Medicaid expansion and the budget. We'll talk about it next on the Journalists Roundtable.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining me tonight are Mary Kay Reinhardt of the Arizona Republic, Jim Small of the Arizona Capital Times, and Jeremy Duda, also from the Arizona Capital Times. After months of political maneuvering and feuding and fussing and fighting, state lawmakers finally adjourned early this morning with a budget that included, most notably, Medicaid expansion. Before we get into all of this, when sine die happens on a session like this, were folks still a little raw around the edges, relieved, exhausted? What was the mood
All
down
of
there?
the above.
All of the above.
I
yeah.
think there was a lot of exhaustion. There were two very late nights back to back to get this special session and regular session closed out. A lot of vitriol, hours upon hours upon hours of very angry speeches. I wouldn't call it debate because one side didn't respond to the other side, but a lot of unhappy campers down there, a lot of very satisfied folks, the bipartisan coalition that brought together with the governor Medicaid expansion and the budget. But in the end, I think everybody tried to part ways with a handshake and a, hey, have a good summer, we'll see you next time. And whatever that brings, we'll find out later. But
yeah, how far does that handshake go, Jim? I mean, is this just politics as usual, or?
Well, it was anything but politics as usual. I mean, I think there are elements of usual politics, but you know, I mean, Mary Kay's right. I mean, raw nerve, I think, doesn't even do justice to what was going on down there. It was a situation. I mean, I had more than one person who's been down there for decades who said things have not been this bad in terms of intra-party Republican fighting since the Mecham impeachment. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, we're talking going back to that, and that was a landmark event, I think, within Arizona politics and within the Republican Party, and you know, so there was a lot of really hurt feelings, and I think people feeling like they were kind of submarined in a way, and time heals all wounds, but whether there's enough time between right now and the beginning of next session, I think is kind of the question, and I'm sure that there's going to be some efforts to try to mend fences here, but I don't know how far that's going to go.
What do you think, Jeremy?
We'll see. The governor's only got one more session left. We'll see if that's enough time to heal some of those wounds, because people are incredibly angry at her. You know, the night on Tuesday when she calls this special session, the atmosphere over there was just toxic. People, you know, the anti-expansion Republicans were just blindsided by this. Now, I mean, the flip side, of course, is the governor felt blindsided by what, you know, Speaker Tobin and adjourning, and Senate President Biggs getting ready to adjourn until the next week. But you know, there's these rumors of coups, of the Speaker and the President getting removed. I mean, nobody knew what was happening. There's just a lot of anger and frustration.
Well, let's go to the dramatics here. We can talk about the session is over. There is a budget, and we can get into that in a second, and who got what and where it's going and the whole 9 yards. But really, the drama regarding Medicaid expansion and the special session. Speaker Tobin decides to take a day off or so, and Senate President decides to take a few days off or so, and just like that, boom, special session? That's what happened?
pretty much. I mean, there was seriously stalled negotiations leading up to that, but that was described as the last straw when Speaker Tobin decided to take Wednesday off. That was the day that this coalition, this bipartisan coalition, had decided they were going to bring this forward in the special session and get these budget bills and Medicaid expansion through. Well, guess what? He took the day off, can't do it now. And so Senate President Biggs, it was rumored, and I think at one point he was planning, and then he said, well, no, then I changed my mind, and I'm actually was going to work on Thursday. But the governor's office and others believed there would be then the House adjourning Wednesday, the Senate adjourning Thursday, Friday, no action at all until the following week. And at that point, they said, we're done. This is it. We're going to move, and which is what happened. And
how unusual was that move?
I mean, special sessions to do budgets are not unheard of, but in this manner, you know, I mean, the governor basically, there was a meeting with the Republicans, a group of the 14 Republicans that ended up voting for the budget, and Democratic leaders, where they kind of hammered out what they were going to do and how this was going to happen, and who was going to kind of be responsible for pulling what weight. And they didn't tell Republican leadership. I mean, Republican leadership knew when reporters started calling and saying, hey, we hear there's a special session that's going to happen. And they went, no, we haven't heard anything. And then 2 minutes later, lo and behold, someone comes down from the governor's office with the paper that says, here, we're calling you into special session.
Yeah, and the expansion opponents were saying, well, she could have just waited a couple more days. The House was going to vote Thursday. The Senate would have voted a few more days later. But it sounds like the governor and this coalition didn't trust that things were going to move along. They felt like there had been intentional delays. And, so they called the special session, and they had a way to make sure there was going to be no more delays. You had people talking about basically plotting to remove Tobin and Biggs if they obstructed things.
Well, during that meeting, which came about, as Jim said, after the speaker decided to take the day off, there was no doubt that this group was willing to remove the speaker and the Senate president if they wouldn't agree to preside over this special session. So what you had was clearly, I think people are saying unprecedented, where you had the leadership, same party as the governor, by the way, not even notified of the special session until after it was basically called. And then, so, we go to the floor and we see these coalition members were the first to arrive, these Republicans. And the Democrats, I don't even know if the Democrats trickled in at that point. But then sort of the leadership comes walking in going, okay, what just happened to us here? And then the game was on, and it really went fast. After that, literally 48 hours, rules suspended, straight to the floor. Debate was, as I said, one-sided. So it moved about as quickly as they could move it.
One-sided, although in the beginning, kind of a semi-boycott, wasn't it? The first nights, a lot of Republicans against expansion decided they were going to sit in a gallery or something along these lines?
Yeah, they were on the floor long enough to get counted for attendance to make sure that they could kind of adjourn in, they could convene the special session, and then they went up to the gallery, and I don't know, there were maybe a dozen of them or so that were sitting up there. They left one, in the House at least, they left one anti-expansion lawmaker, Adam Quasman, a freshman representative from southern Arizona, who gave a pretty fiery floor speech and kind of lashed out at the governor, lashed out at his colleagues who were facilitating this in the Republican Party, and lashed out more at those two than the Democrats, but certainly kind of at everybody.
And then we wind up with 9 hours of debate before finally the House makes it. 9 hours of, Jeremy, from what I understand, I wasn't there, you guys were, some pretty nasty stuff.
Oh yeah, and people were, first of all, calling, like you said, it was calling it a debate is going to be extremely accurate because the anti-expansion Republicans kept asking if they would yield to questions. They said no, 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 over and over again.
Why would they not yield to questions?
I think they wanted to just keep it moving, and I think that there wasn't really. Everything has been said at this point. I mean, they're really, and sort of there's these dueling narratives, right? That there was a lot of concern and consternation about transparency and about the rules, and leapfrogging into this and getting it on the floor and people not having a chance to look at 650 pages of amendments. And that's all true. But most of what's in there, people had been talking about for months.
And there weren't a bunch of amendments offered anyway. I mean, the things were slowing down just because of the amendments being offered.
Correct? Oh yeah, they knew they were going to lose, but they're offering in principle, amendments on abortion, on tougher circuit breakers for these federal matching funds. They knew they were going down, but they were going to go down with the ship.
And without much comment, they did go down with the ship.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it basically was, excuse me, was a little more than standing up and the sponsor of the bill saying oppose the amendment, sit back down, and that was kind of the extent of it. And then it was the other folks, the rest of the Republican caucus, standing up and making speech after speech after speech after speech about why the amendment was good and why the tactics were bad and why the substance of the budget and especially the health care part were bad and would lead Arizona into disaster.
Within the criticism of these speeches, a little badgering going on, a little taunting going on as well? I mean, were these straight policy speeches or was this? I
think there was a combination.
Yeah.
I think, clearly some very sincere concerns about the Affordable Care Act and about Medicaid expansion and about the federal government's ability and willingness and the future or the sustainability of it and whether or not we're going to end up being left holding the bag, insuring another 300,000 to 400,000 people and then ending up paying for the bulk of that the federal government won't. But there was also a lot of, frankly, politics and ideology, and you guys better watch it. And we're going to, when the primaries come around next year, you'll be darn sure that folks are going to know about this, and your political careers are short.
Yeah, I mean, Representative Farnsworth said that the governor was throwing a temper tantrum. I believe another representative said that she will go down as the best Democratic governor in Arizona history.
Representative Kavanaugh said he was ashamed to be a state legislator.
Yeah, ashamed to be Why is he ashamed to be a state legislator when the majority of the legislature wants something and got it?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think part of it was the process. They felt completely betrayed by a Republican governor, right, and some of their own colleagues in their caucus, in the Republican caucus, and they felt that the narrative there was we were going to get there, we were going to get this done, we were going to get a vote on Medicaid expansion. You guys didn't save any time, so the process angered them, and then of course the policy itself, Medicaid expansion, they just feel is an abomination. It's unconscionable. It's something that this legislature should not be doing.
But I think, a lot of people thought it was an abomination to cut this in the first place, and for some of the budget cuts in the past few years as well. And there were vitriolic speeches as well. Mm-hmm. But goodness gracious, as someone was tweeting, I think, an ex-lawmaker that these people are slime for going against. I think people from the outside look at this and they see the hardline Republicans more worried about the Republican Party and inter-party politics than actual policy. I mean, was that idea floating around out there?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's one way that I think people will definitely look at it. And again, whether you like what happened or abhor what happened, I think a lot of it depends on your perspective, on where you come from. I mean, if you're an independent or if you're a Democrat, you may not have a problem with it. If you're a Republican, a conservative or a Tea Party member, you're going to look at what happened and you're going to be offended. And most of the people that we've talked to that are from that perspective are, and you can kind of sympathize with them. I mean, you can understand. I mean, look, they passed a budget, and while a lot of these concepts were out there, they passed a budget that didn't go through a single committee. The House never considered any part of the budget. They considered one of those bills in the budget, and they failed it in committee in regular session. But then the rest of that budget went straight to the floor. So all of those House members, while they may have been aware of what was generally in the budget, and certainly they'd been briefed on it by staff over time and everything, they had never gone through the actual process. That budget never went to committee. It never went to caucus so that they could sit there and discuss it. They never got to sit down with their leadership and discuss what was in the budget and fight for things in it. And so I think that was really the root of where a lot of this outrage came from.
What do you think, Jeremy?
And a lot of the horse trading that normally went on, the majority of the Republicans in both chambers, they were completely cut out of this. They were out of the loop. You had the coalition of the 14 Republicans and the Democrats, and all the deal making pretty much went on there, and it all revolved around the Medicaid expansion. So everyone else is just out of the loop.
Yes.
Well, I was just going to say, but I think back to the point that. Yes, it didn't go through a House Appropriations. It went through House Appropriations, and then they killed the Medicaid expansion bill. Whether or not they didn't know what was in the Medicaid bill, I think the governor's office and the coalition would argue that everybody had a pretty darn good idea what it was they were voting on.
Well, and Senate President Biggs was quoted as saying it was tragic that we can't have open debate and discussion on these issues. I've been hearing that for years from Democrats and other folks down there who say that they've been shut out of the process as well.
A lot of Democrats saying, well, welcome to my world, right? Yeah.
But it makes it, and someone was saying that the conservatives and the they described themselves as a minority party.
Right. They did describe themselves as a minority party. And there was a feeling among some of those Republicans that because they hold the majority in both the House and the Senate, that their policies should be the policies of this state. And the Democrats, and Chad Campbell, for example, stood up and said, gee, guess what? We are Democrats. We are, 13 in the Senate and 24 in the House, and we also represent the people of this state. And, here we have a, together with these Republicans, we have a majority, and that's how it works. That's how this whole process is supposed to work, and that's how it used to work years ago. That's how things used to be done.
And this coalition, who are members of the coalition? Are these folks that are in districts in which they are somewhat safe? Not safe at all?
Some of them are in districts where they're probably potentially safe. Some of them are in districts where they're really probably not safe. It kind of runs the gamut, I think, which kind of speaks to a little bit of kind of what Mary Kay was getting at, the idea that this was a vote by the majority of both chambers. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And yes, the governor did reach outside of her party to cobble this majority together. I mean, there's no question about it. Some of these people are going to be in trouble. You look at someone like Doris Goodale from Mojave County. I mean, Mojave County is the home of Ron Gould. It's the most conservative county in the state. It's the only county that rejected Prop 100 3 years ago. And Obamacare was a central issue in the Senate race there last year, in the state Senate race. That's going to be a huge issue this time, and Doris Goodale is going to have an uphill climb if she's going to get over that hurdle.
But a lot of the interests, pushing for Medicaid expansion, the Chamber of Commerce and the hospitals in this Restoring Arizona campaign, they've been saying pretty much all session, if you're a Republican, you vote for this, you get primaried, we are going to come to your aid. And there's even some, pretty snide remarks about stuff like that on the floor the past couple of days. People saying, well, the special interests in the governor basically paid these people off, to vote for it, and which the governor denied. She said, I'd be happy to campaign for him. But the Restoring Arizona folks, the chamber, they've pretty clearly made that offer all session long that they are going to come to people's aid if they need it.
And if you talk to the members of this, to the Republican members of this coalition, to a person, they will tell you that this was a decision about what's best for the state of Arizona, not about their political careers. From the beginning, those that stood up from the very beginning with the governor at her first rally said, hey, I'm here to do what's right. I'm not here to get reelected. Now, would they like to get reelected? You bet. And there's a couple of freshmen in this group. There's TJ Shope from Coolidge. There's Ethan Orr from Tucson. Those guys may be one-termers, and they knew that when they made this decision to support a proposal that they knew would get them uber primaried in this coming August.
Okay, so
a year from now.
Okay, so before we get to the budget overall and the session overall, one last thing on Medicaid expand. There was talk from the beginning that you needed 2/3 of the majority to get this thing through because it's a tax, not an assessment, and you can parse words any way you want. Is this going to head it for court here?
Almost certainly, yeah. Goldwater Institute today, I know Jeremy spoke with them today, and they've been up front for a long time now saying that we think that this is a problem. We think you need to have this 2/3 majority in order to get this passed, and they said today that they're already starting to look at the legal issues involved in this, and I would imagine that they're going to file a lawsuit at some point in the near future.
Yeah, one of the things they're also waiting for, of course, is this threatened citizen referendum on the issue. Former lawmakers Ron Gold and Frank Antinori are planning. I've heard rumors of other folks, maybe folks with connection to some deep pockets, are also planning some things too. You need 86,000 signatures in the next 90 days. Realistically, you probably need to get about 120,000 to make sure you have enough. But if you do that, then the whole thing gets put on hold until after the 2014 election. That really complicates things, and it also makes this a major issue for next year's election, which it's hard to say who that benefits, but that's enough. Put the magnifying glass over everyone who voted for this.
In terms of getting those signatures in the first place, how likely, how difficult?
Well, we in Arizona have a relatively low threshold. It's 5%, of those who voted, I think, in the last election, and I don't 86,000 and change. It's going to be the heat of summer. A lot depends perhaps on whether they can pay for those petition circulators or whether they're going to have to go out and get it. But they do have a pretty good network of precinct committee people, that grassroots political operative in the GOP that opposes the expansion, and I'm sure they'll be out in force. So we'll have to see.
Well, how likely do you think?
It depends. I think Mary Kay's exactly right that if they get money, I think that they can do it. 90 days is not a long time to gather 120,000 signatures, especially with an all-volunteer effort. We've never seen an all-volunteer effort get anything on the ballot for, just through the normal initiative process. And in that case, they can have 18 months to do it. So this is a tall order. And if someone can come in and pony up $300,000 to pay for signatures, I think that it's very doable.
Okay, with the idea of getting signatures in the initiative process in mind, there were other pieces of legislation that, Jeremy, when the minute this special session ended, did everyone just go screaming for their desks and looking over piles and piles of paper? Because how many bills had to be considered here? Oh,
there's a lot of them in there. There are a couple of pretty big ones. Like you said, speaking of getting signatures, there was this omnibus elections bill, and that does a number of very interesting things. One of the most interesting things that happened is something that got tacked onto that very recently. Changes the signature requirements for third parties to get on the ballot. Makes it extremely difficult for Libertarians and Greens. A lot of Republicans feel like this is going to help them out come next year, where they lose votes in some of these tight congressional races to Libertarian candidates. There's some stuff in there that weeds people off of the permanent early voter list, and this has been very contentious all session. Basically says if you don't vote, if you receive an early ballot and you don't vote for a couple of cycles, then they just send you they basically take your name off the list, send you a thing that makes you sign it to send it back, or they take you off. They are prohibiting campaigns from picking up people's early ballots, which is a real staple of Democratic get-out-the-vote efforts.
And these were all issues that were very contentious during the session, and then it looked kind of like they may not make it there toward the end. Boom, they made it, huh?
Yeah, they did. The reason that they weren't going to make it was some internal politics that was holding bills up. Some fighting amongst Andy Tobin and Andy Biggs in the House and Senate and some members there. But yeah, they ended up kind of getting all rolled up into one package and put up, and they didn't pass immediately. The first vote, one Republican, State Senator Steve Pearce, former Senate President Steve Pearce, voted against it, didn't explain his vote why, only told one of my colleagues that, well, it's because I promised someone I'd vote no. And then 4 hours later, they brought the bill back. And wouldn't you know it, he'd been talked into voting yes for it. And
someone else simply voted yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the way things happen a lot of times on Sine Die night, where an issue that's important to leadership gets killed, and then deals get made. To move another piece of legislation, to do something else somewhere else, and before you know it, you've got something. You've got votes changed, and that's what happened.
It's a kind of a day that makes your head spin, that last day of the session, because you have bills flying around. People know they have like 20 minutes to get this done. Everybody's going to go home, and so you have people trying to line up votes, amendments. I mean, on dozens of bills. It's really hard to keep track of, and they're flying every which way, and then boom, it's over.
So the concern people had that we didn't have time to vet the Medicaid expansion was not necessarily voiced for these other bills, is what you're telling me.
That's the last chance they had.
Okay. Real quickly now, the sales tax collection reform, TPT as it's called, transaction period, that made it, but I know that there was real concerns with cities and towns on this. We've done some stories on this.
Yeah, the cities and towns are very concerned. This is going to cost them money. It changes the way that a lot of taxes are collected and where they're collected. And this has been a battle all session long. It's undergone a number of revisions, and very late, the governor made a major concession on this a couple of weeks ago, and in the last couple of weeks or so, the League of Cities and the cities they represent finally said, okay, we'll withdraw our opposition for a couple of changes here and here. And I think, by yesterday, it seemed like, the League had withdrawn its opposition. It had enough support to pass, but the bigger question was going to be, are a lot of the people in the legislature still so angry at the governor they were just going to spike this?
Yeah.
Because this was her number 2 priority, and obviously got vastly overshadowed by the number 1 priority. But earlier in the day, when I spoke with Karen Fann, who's been one of the quarterbacks for this, she told me, said, we had the votes, but Republicans have been coming up to me and saying, I'm going to switch my vote because I'm not going to vote for the governor's priority. But in the end, it was a unanimous vote for it in the Senate and a near unanimous vote in the House. So maybe that, despite all the bad blood, that could potentially bode well for the governor, coming up next session.
Interesting. And one thing that did not make it was the last push regarding abortion restrictions and this warrantless. Talk to us about the bill real quickly here, and why did that not make it?
Yeah, it was a bill that got introduced very late in the process. I mean, on Monday it got introduced and went through the Appropriations Committee. It would have done multiple things. It was designed primarily to allow state health officials to go into clinics that provide abortions and do basically unannounced unannounced searches and compliance searches without having any warrants or any cause to go in there. But it also affected Medicaid. It affected, it would have limited how Medicaid money could be given to clinics that provide abortions and things like that. And so there was a lot of concern from the ninth floor, from the governor's office, because of that component. And I think that concern trickled down into that bipartisan coalition. There were the votes the bill was supposed to go to the floor a couple days ago. There were votes to put on an amendment that would have gutted the entire bill, turn it into a study committee, and just basically send it along its way. And so the proponents backed off of it, and by the time the dust settled yesterday, it was clear that the votes were not going to materialize.
I mean, that bill was tied to Medicaid expansion. I don't think there's any question about it. Kathy Herod from the Center for Arizona Policy had proposed very similar, identical language to basically defund Planned Parenthood and any abortion provider. And that was unacceptable to Democrats. Every Democrat vote was needed on the Medicaid expansion. That was not going to go anywhere. And she tried. She certainly made many efforts. And at the end of the day, if the governor wanted Medicaid expansion, I think that was not going to be able to happen.
Well, it was funny that language resurfaced because the governor, after Kathy Herod and CAP started raising this issue a few months ago, the governor, she sat down with them. They looked at it for a few weeks, tried to figure out a way to get around it that, would stand up in court and wouldn't violate this court ruling from a few months ago. And after a few weeks, the governor just rejected CAP's language, said it's unnecessary and unlikely to stand up in court, and just kind of brush it aside. And so it was really interesting to see at the last minute CAP, raise this, bring this language and put it back up into a bill, kind of over the objections of, the governor, who's been an extremely good ally to them for the last 4 years.
All right, very quickly, yes or no? The dramatics of this session spill over into the next session?
Yes.
The bipartisan coalitions, certainly on certain issues, university funding, K through 12, health and welfare, for sure.
What do you think, Jeremy?
I think so. I think it's going to be tough for the governor to get votes from a lot of these Republicans if she has a major agenda next year.
All right, good stuff, guys. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Monday on Arizona Horizon, we will look at the latest instructions from a federal judge regarding last month's ruling that Sheriff Joe Arpaio's office engaged in racial profiling, and does voice-activated technology help drivers focus on the road? That's Monday evening, 5:30 and 10 on Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.